Hey guys, Josh with Budget Mechanic. Today I'm going to be diagnosing some clunking rattling sounds coming from the front end of this old Corolla. Though this is going to apply to most vehicles. And when you have those kind of sounds, especially going over rough road or over bumps, it's going to be one of five things. It's going to be your struts, your sway bar, your control arm bushings, your tie rods, or your ball joints. And most of those you can actually see and diagnose just by taking off the front tire. So, I'm going to show you how to do that. Once you get one of the wheels off the ground, but before you take the wheel off, there's a couple of checks you can do at this stage. So one thing we're going to do is grab it at 9 and 3 and try to shake it this way. You can see there's a ton of play. Inner or outer tie rods are bad on this one. You can see all the motion there. That should be super firm. Second test you can do is going to test for ball joints is at 12 and 6. You do the same kind of thing. And that feels pretty solid. So ball joints are likely to be good. Another test you can do is with a lever or a big screwdriver. Put it underneath and lift up and down. See if there's any play up and down. That's another test for a ball joint, if there's any looseness there. So I already have some suspects now, and we're going to pop this wheel off and take a visual inspection. Okay, so once you get your wheel off, this is kind of the zone where everything lives for your suspension and steering, at least the parts that are going to make all the noise. Okay, so point one, we're going to start with the sway bar, and here's the sway bar link, and it's this link right here that links the sway bar to the control arm. They can be really long or really short. This is a pretty short one. It's made up of these two joints, one on each end, that are supposed to be encased in grease and have a rubber seal. And you can visually look at them, and if they're leaking or if this rubber seal is broken, that's a good sign that they're bad. And you can kind of see these are pulling away from the metal. They're not sealing anymore. Probably all the grease has leaked out. So visually they look bad. Then also I can play with it and try to twist it by hand. I shouldn't be able to move it like this. So the fact that it's loose enough that I can move it by my hand means that they're probably bad. You notice this especially when you kind of take off from a stop sign. You'll hear like a clicking or a clunking. It's often these guys. Pretty cheap, pretty easy, so that's usually the first thing I do. Continuing on with the sway bar, if you follow back from the link that we just looked at, all the way back underneath the car, you'll eventually hit the sway bar bushing that helps attach it to the frame of the car. These are rubber, and what you're looking for when they're bad is when the rubber is disintegrated and the metal bar is touching either the clamp over top of it or touching the frame of the car. So sometimes this will disintegrate and it'll allow the metal bar to bang into the other metal, and that's where you'll get clunking sounds. This one looks decent. There's plenty of meat left in between on that side and on that side. Number two, we have tie rods. This is your tie rod, steers the car. You have your inner tie rod, which is goes right into your rack and pinion and sitting underneath this rubber boot. So you can't see it, but you can feel it if it's bad. And I think this one is, so that should not be moving in and out like that. And this is your outer tie rod. This one you can actually see again. It's a sealed grease joint here, and again, if the rubber is cracked or split or grease is coming out, kind of like that, chances are this is bad. And then you can also grab the tie rod and see if you can rotate it. This one I can, but it's pretty stiff, so it's not terrible. I bet there's still some life in there, but because this boot is leaking and cracking, sort of its days are numbered. I think probably this is okay, and it's the inner tie rod that's making all the racket. And one way I can kind of isolate the two is if I push this inner tie rod in so that it's not moving, then I grab the brake rotor and I try to wiggle it. If this is loose and there's any play, I'm going to feel the play between these 2 points. But I don't see any play here. It's only when I let go of the inner tie rod that I get the play. Okay, so number three is going to be your control arm bushings. So this is your control arm here. It's kind of a triangle. It's got 3 points, and 2 of the points are bushings for the control arm. So if you follow this back to where it pivots in the frame, there's rubber bushings right here. And the bolt goes through that huge chunk of rubber. Both on top of the joint up here and in the bottom right there. If there's any big splits or gaps or tears, chances are that it's a bad bushing. Okay, and then the front side bushing of the control arm is up here. So it's a similar setup. You have these rubber, the whole rubber bushing goes through this whole joint. And you can kind of see the ends on this end and right in there. And again, if those are cracked or torn, probably bad. Control arm bushings, really, when those go bad, you end up just replacing the whole control arm, because to just buy the joint, they have to be pressed in by a machinist. And usually it's more cost effective just to replace this whole control arm. Number 4 is going to be your ball joint. That's going to be on the third point of your control arm. If you follow it out to where it connects to your wheel, your ball joint is going to be right out on the end here. And the ball joint has this, again, rubber section which holds in a bunch of grease. And this boot here will split, crack, let the grease out, dry up when it goes bad. It's actually what causes it to go bad. But this one actually looks pretty good. And I didn't feel it when I wiggled the tire either, so this one's probably okay. On this car, there's only one control arm down here. But on some designs, there's actually an upper control arm as well, which sits almost exactly the same, but it's a second one up here, and it will have a bushing on each end, just like that one does, and it'll have an upper ball joint, just like the one on the bottom does. If you have an upper control arm, you just want to check those points on it, the same as you did the lower. The fifth thing that I talked about was your shock mount. And if you follow this strut all the way to the top, the mount is actually going to be inside the engine compartment. And there's bearings in here that allow you to turn the steering wheel and it pivots. And when they go bad, you get a rattling sound, especially on rough road. So how I normally diagnose these is I hear it when I'm driving. It always sounds really high because it happens right at this level, whereas all of the other suspension steering sounds happen kind of low. This one is unique in that it feels like it's coming right through the windshield, the sound. If it's really bad, you could open your hood and push down on the car, bounce it, and you'd be able to see it move. But for the most part, you can't visually tell that it's bad. So those are the 5 potential sources of rattling or clunking sounds from your steering or suspension. On this car, it was an inner tie rod and sway bar link that were bad. So I'm going to go ahead and replace those on both sides just to cover my bases. Thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.